I'm gonna like put my teeth on my phone. I was like, I feel like I'm disgusting. Okay. Can we actually like cover this in 60 minutes? I was like, there's a lot of things on this list. I was like, there is lots to cover on that. I made him yesterday. Yeah, I made him between finals yesterday so I could have a bag.
We answer questions
As you go along?
Yes. I'm like, he was really easy to make. He was whipped up really quick, so.
So adorable. So cute.
Oh. Forever traumatized from the sewing machine. I'm Becca, by the way. Hello. Hello. I was like, more people who are like, I don't know what I'm doing. Because I got here and they were like, did you want like costume design? I was like, yes.
I'm supposed to do a doll panel with Nicole, and she didn't show up. She thought it was a 3, but it was a 1.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'm gonna buy myself.
Oh, okay. I think I know Nicole. I think.
Probably.
Yeah, just wonderful and I don't want to say boisterous is the right.
She's boisterous.
Yeah. Wonderful and boisterous.
Her personality fills a room.
Yeah.
All right, guys, welcome to Calgary Expo. Everybody having a good time? This is our panel on costume design. I would just like to take a minute to remind everybody that there will be no recording and no flash photography, okay? Thanks very much, and I'll turn it over to our panelists, Heather. Panelist Heather.
+2.
All right, so I'm just going to introduce myself once again. My name is Heather. This right next to me, this is Crystal. This is Becca. We're all experienced cosplayers. We've been doing this, how long have you been doing this?
5 years, maybe?
5. When I first started, 15 years.
And
Oh god, I'm the baby on the. I'm
Hello.
I'm the baby.
And I've been doing this since 2001. I don't want to do math. That's like 12 years? Okay.
You're old. This is the issue. Is I don't get to cosplay as much because I'm younger than you guys.
Don't call me old. I'm not old. Is your microphone turned on?
Yeah, I think so. I hear tapping.
So pretty much,
Me and Crystal
it's a
can
good
check.
thing that my PowerPoint presentation, the file was corrupt like 2 days before, but I don't have a projector anyway. So I guess I'm okay. So pretty much what this is it's discussing for you guys out there, who here makes their own costumes?
That's good.
Who here wants to learn how to make their own costumes?
Also good.
Well, you can bombard us with questions as we go along. Just please raise your hand. Don't just shout out. We'd really appreciate that. So starting with the very first thing is choosing an existing character to cosplay or designing your own costume. How many of you, the ones that want to cosplay as something that they designed themselves?
Oh, we got one. Oh, two.
1, 2.
You guys, it's not bad to cosplay original characters. It's good. Something fresh.
So how many of you want to cosplay as an existing character and you're like, I don't know how to do this? How many times have we had that problem? Too many to count,
Too many to
right?
count.
Yeah. So pretty much what happens is that when you're choosing a character to cosplay, usually the best thing to do is you need to know what your budget is before you even start. You need to know exactly what your budget is. If you are not willing to spend $500, you
Or
shouldn't
more.
be doing something like a historical piece, because you'd be looking at buying things like velveteen or velvet or
And you need like 20 meters of it, and it's like $20 a meter. So, math.
yeah. So you got to be very careful with what you are planning on doing whenever it comes to any of the costumes that you want to do. So keep in mind, very first thing is your budget. What is your budget? So for most people, their budget is typically around $100 to $150 thereabouts is the average that people spend on their costumes. And I know this because I worked at Fabricland and I'm cutting fabric for people. And it's like, are you making a costume? And they were like, yep. I was like, you don't have enough. But my budget It's the first thing I would always hear. But my budget is this, but I don't have enough material. So be very, very aware of how much you can spend on a costume. And you need to factor in things like if you're gonna wear a wig, if you're gonna dye your hair, okay?
Sounds like they're gonna riot back there. I'm like, it sounds like a riot. I'm sorry. I'm not sure
They're
if it's as
hurting
loud
each
out
other
there.
for fun. Maybe it is a riot. I don't know. What is going on over there? Do you guys know?
Oh. It is a riot.
That's a lot of angry people in one room. Wow, that is noisy and distracting, actually. I'm like, ooh, shiny, what's going on? So, you guys, we'll start with this. Whose budget is typically around, let's just say, $300?
Depends on the costume.
Whose budget is typically around $200? Whose budget is around $100 or less? So the people who raise their hands for 100 or less, do you guys sew or alter? Or do you alter? Do both? Yes, bargain centers at fabric stores are your best friend. Unless you find those horribly ugly, it's like floral print, green and like brown. And
Except for them, they're the fuzzy ones with the floral print, like the fake fur with flowers. Were you there at Fabricland when we had that? I also worked at Fabricland, same Fabricland as her, but I quit before she worked for. I didn't want to work with her.
we didn't want to work together. We know each other. Why would we want to work together? Ugh. So, again, budget is very important. Keep in mind what your budget is. Stick to your budget. Otherwise, you might be in financial trouble afterwards. I've been in that place. I've spent $250 on a wig. You do not want to do that. It really, really sucks. So when you choose a character to cosplay, the thing is once again, you keep in mind your budget. When you look at your costume, you should probably determine what kind of materials you are going to be looking at. So, for example, if you're looking at a costume and you see a lot of leather, your budget is obviously not going to be under $100. You're probably going to be looking to spend a lot more and probably spend a lot more time on it. There are alternatives to leather, such as soft vinyl and pleather, that you can easily use, and they are definitely cheaper. Yes? That's another thing, is altering existing articles of clothing, which I actually have on there. So don't worry.
The only thing with jackets, and I find, remember they have a very limited amount of fabric actually on clothes. If you plan on taking an article of clothing and specifically cutting it to be fabric for something else, just be aware that there's only so much. So. Yeah, so like if you wanted to make like pants out of that, like I don't think you could make pants out of like a jacket. I just don't think it's possible, even like a floor length.
No, you can do small pieces like patches for kids. For a jacket, you could probably turn it into a vest, things like that. It's pretty simple to do, but yeah, you're very limited on what you can do because there's already seam sewn into it, so it's very difficult from that point on to necessarily use it for stuff like that, especially like pants.
Are we still talking about budget, or can I talk about picking a character? Are we still talking about budget, or can I talk about picking a character?
Getting into choosing a character and figuring out for materials and things like that.
Okay. Well, the only thing, I guess it kind of ties into materials and choosing your characters, but when you're looking at who to cosplay, specifically if you're choosing someone who's already a predetermined design, is choose within your own skill set. I mean, sure, there's some super duper awesome looking cosplays and costumes out of some games, but if you've never sewn before, I really don't suggest that you try to start out with like Assassin's Creed or I don't know.
You could, but just keep in mind your time. So if you haven't sewn before and you're gonna sew something like Ezio, start early. Very, very early, and make sure that you make enough time for your mistakes and to learn from your mistakes. Because I never took a sewing class. I don't know about you ladies.
outside of like junior high home ec.
Yeah.
See, I didn't even take one there. I didn't
It was
take a single
mandatory.
sewing class. I learned how to sew by watching a friend's mom for 2 days. That's how I learned how to sew. My very first costume was a shirt with jeans that I bought.
She
I
was
made the
L.
shirt. I made my L costume, thank you. But anyway, it was an orange shirt with jeans and a jacket. But I made the shirt, and that was the first thing I'd ever sewn, and it was very difficult, but I started sewing that shirt a month and a half in advance because I was like, I've never done this before. And it took me nearly a day to figure out how to thread the machine. So, I mean, you gotta make enough time if you've never sewn before so you can make your mistakes, so you don't get frustrated, so you don't get upset, and you don't run into the fact that you're still sewing on the day of the convention because you started a week before. Which we do that now because we're like, we know how to sew. Let's do this a week before. And then we're crying because the costume isn't done.
Or you're running on 3 hours of sleep every night because you're staying up late to sew.
Not only that, but if you get into the habit of starting early and you make it a habit, you will always have that habit. And then you will sit there and laugh at the rest of us who are constantly stuck with 3 hours of sleep trying to finish the costume the day of the convention. I'm sure that was a costume question.
I'll be a jerk and just, text.
Ignore
and-
them. So when you're choosing a character to cosplay, the most important thing is always choose a character you like. I know a lot of people who do these panels sit there and discuss things like body types and stuff like that. I'm not one of those people. I am someone who truly believes that if you like a character, if you love a character, dress up as that character. Honestly, the thing with the costume is, for example, I used to be a lot larger. I ended up getting quite sick and I dropped the weight, but I used to be a lot larger, and one of the girls that I cosplayed as, she wore a very tight dress. It wasn't revealing or anything like that, but it was a very tight dress, and I was like, but I did it anyway because I love the character. So that's what I honestly believe. I love the character. If you're concerned about things like weight, this, that, and the next thing, make small alterations so the costume is comfortable for you. Don't be so hell-bent on accuracy that you put aside something that you honestly want to do. Do what you want to do. If you're not comfortable, make small changes and things like that. Don't be so obsessive about accuracy. Do what you want to do. Because everybody is beautiful. Love you guys. Yay! So if you are designing an original costume, one of the things that you need to keep in mind is make sure that it's possible. Okay, there's a lot of stuff you can do with cosplay, and then there's
A lot more that you can do with drawing.
Yeah. The thing is your imagination can do so much, but when you're trying to turn that into a constructed piece, it is very, very difficult. Some things that you can do if you need help, if you're like, well, I'm not very good at drawing people or figuring out if it would fit a person, they have things online that you can get, which is just an outline of a person that they use for outfits when they design outfits for models, that you can easily get printed off and then design your outfit on it. But keep in mind, make something that's possible to do, especially if you're just starting out. I mean, you don't want to make this big, huge monster beast thing that would take 6 people and you just started sewing. What do you guys think for originals? Because you do a lot of historical stuff.
I do, yeah.
So you'd be good for that.
I do a lot of historical costuming as well, and I like to draw my costumes out. Like sometimes I just kind of draw like a basic figure, no heads, no hands, no feet generally, and just kind of go, oh, this is what I want, this is what I want, this is what I want, and I make like side views and back views. I make like fabric lists, especially for historical costuming, because fabric choice is really important if you want to get into historical accuracy. So then I start making lists of things that I need, like do I have to wear a corset with this? Do I have any underskirts? And you have to kind of consider all of that when you're doing it. And it's really important, especially for original characters, like say you're going to make like a Jedi costume, you have to pick what kind of pants you want, what kind of tops you want, how many layers you want, fabric choices for those layers, your cloak, your belts. It gets to be a lot. And I like making lists, and I pin them to my wall. And then I have them there to see all the time. It's wonderful.
For how much work an original character is, it is honestly worth it because you've made something entirely your own, and it's just a lot of Crystal stuff, for instance. It's incredible. A lot of the stuff that she's done, a lot of the historical things. Yay!
Also, if you're not very good at drawing, like I draw stick figures. It's great. But again, I don't really do OCs, but I do a bit of fashion design on the side. But again, I can't draw out my garments, so I just make really detailed lists of how I want things to look. I'm a bit better at visualizing things in my head that way. Not everyone's like that, but it is an option. You don't need to have the ability to draw to design.
It's just specifically knowing exactly what you want. See, I'm a drawer. I have to draw it out. I can't make lists or anything because I'll never stick to it. I always go kind of off on my own tangent with, oh, this looks nice. What can I do with this? And then I'll draw something like based on it. So everyone has their own way of doing it. I find the drawing way easier. Becca finds the listing way easier. And Crystal does a combination of both. But yeah, for an original character, the thing is put together pieces. I've seen people go as like Batman, Transformer, blah, 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 blah. Like, some people come up with some really original stuff, but it's just a case of keep in mind, well, obviously your budget, and then the next thing is that make sure that it's even possible, because that one guy who transformed into a car, he was like Bumblebee or something like that. Yeah. There is a guy who made a transformer, right? And he could actually transform, but he needed so many people to help him do this that I was like, oh, well, that's very inconvenient, isn't it? Because you can't necessarily go anywhere without these 2 or 3 people walking around with you, you know? So it's really much how much you want to inconvenience, say, your friends or this, that, or the next thing to keep in mind. Altering, once you figured out if you're going with an original character, you're going with an existing character. And the next thing to talk about is altering existing articles of clothing. So, which character could you use that you could alter an existing article?
I did Aerith. I did, for altering clothing, I actually did Crisis Core Aerith and Kingdom Hearts 2 Aerith. And for Crisis Core, I actually bought like a white tank top and a big white flowy skirt, and I added ribbons and flowers to it, and it was done, and it was great. Pretty much same story with Kingdom Hearts 2. I actually made the top, but the skirt, I found at Goodwill. I added some lace to it, and it was good to go. I think I did Final Fantasy X Riku as well, off of mostly alterations. I don't think that costume's ever seen daylight, though.
My L costume, I don't know if you guys know Death Note very well. Yeah, I'm seeing a couple people nodding. L is a very easy costume. L is a black spiky wig, bags under your eyes. I can't speak English today. I really can't. Okay. It's a white sweatshirt with nothing on it and a pair of baggy black pants, and you literally just walk around like this with really bad posture.
Also, lollipops.
And no shoes and lollipops. He likes candy. So I asked a buddy of mine, hey, can you please go out and find me a white sweatshirt, just a thin white sweatshirt, somewhere, probably go to Walmart or something. He goes, yeah, I can do that. He comes back with a triple XL. At the time, I was a medium. I was like, what can I do with this? So pretty much what I did was I turned it inside out. I pinned along the sleeve line and the side line and took it into my measurements. And it actually looked pretty good, considering the entire thing, except for the collar, was altered. I had to change the bottom and everything because it was way too long. I could have worn it to bed. So yeah, it was about as long as what I'm wearing right now. It was crazy, but that's just altering existing articles of clothing. You can do things like you can add patches, for instance, the leather one, for instance, if you need a leather patch.
My jacket doesn't have patches on the elbows, but that's all I'd have to do to make this jacket like
accurate.
Awesome. It's really good now, but it just needs I need
See,
elbow patches.
And this would be one of the cases that why go to a fabric store and pay that much when you can go somewhere else, like a Goodwill or Salvation Army or something like that, and get one for a couple bucks and just rip it apart and use it for patches. And then if those patches wear out,
Just replace them.
you
'cause
just
they cost
replace
you
them
nothing.
with what you got. There's another character. It's Roxas from Kingdom Hearts. I don't know if you guys know who that is. It's a video game, and pretty much the pants that he's wearing are pretty easy to find. They're like either they're khaki style pants, and all you pretty much have to do is you go out, grab a pair of khakis, grab another pair of khakis that's a bit of a different color, and just cut the legs off one and put them on the next one, on the legs of the other one. Ta-da! You
Use,
got
like, two-tone
Roxas's pants.
just to
Yeah, they're
explain
two-tone
what's
pants.
happening.
Like it's like a darker beige and then a lighter one with a bit of a square pattern. It's very easy to do, and all you have to do is just cut the leg off the other one and make sure that your ends are either taped down or something like that, just so they don't fray. So that's alteration of clothing. Shirts, for instance, I've seen tons of people who have done things like Kaylee from Firefly. You guys know who that is? Okay. A lot more people nodding on that one. Thank goodness. You guys know the outfit that she wears where she has the Japanese style umbrella and she wears it's Chinese style top, and then beneath it she has her work clothes, right? So I've seen people who will go out, they will buy them from they'll buy them off a Mechanic Buddy or things like that. They'll cut the arms off and they'll alter the pant legs. Is that fine? Yeah, that's
Totally.
perfectly acceptable. Not only that, but they're worried about oh, well, it's fraying here. Yeah, but you're wearing a jacket over it. Honestly, in a lot of cases like that, for fraying, if you don't know how to sew, if you take some tape, put it around the frayed edges, and put them on the inside, it doesn't fray anymore, and you don't have to worry about it. So that's one of the easy shortcut ways of doing things. Safety pins will save your life.
Safety pins are your friends. Love them.
Even if you do sew and you're pretty content with your sewing ability, always pack safety pins. Always.
Also, always pack a needle and thread. Thread in the color of your costume, because mishaps happen. Are either of you using safety pins right now?
I should be.
I
But my collar came undone, its button's gone, and I don't have a safety pin to hold it close. I'm hoping my bow tie is tight enough that it'll stay close.
This is why she needs a needle and thread. See, I'm gonna stand up. Safety pin! Yay! So yes, honestly the most useful thing. But even if you don't sew, or if you're like, oh, I don't have time to do this, that, or the next thing, there are some kinds of fabric tape and things like that that you can use, where you can easily just put it around and you're like, I don't want this to fray, and fold it up, and it looks fine. So you don't really have to worry in some cases. You obviously don't want to make your entire costume out of tape or hot glue.
things like that don't withstand strain. It's good if it's something flowy and it's hanging off of you and you have it tacked down and then it's just off on its own. But if it's supposed to support something or is in a spot where you are moving it often, it is really better just to try to learn how to sew or safety pin it. Safety pins are a lot better than glue and tape.
Hot glue is your friend in some things, but nothing where it's being used a lot. I'll show you another example. Yeah.
I get to stand up a lot. Most of you guys won't be able to see, but the bottoms of these shoes are hot glue. Right here. So when I go like this, sorry, I'm coming apart.
Be very, very careful with hot glue and where it is. I made a hat. I took one of those costume pimp hat things, and I cut the top of it off, and then I covered it with fabric. And I was like, well, I don't really have enough time to do trial and error with a circle right now. So I folded it over and hot glued the other piece on top of it. It looks fine. Hamel?
Oh,
Yeah.
I was like, this bag is half hot glued as well. The only part that's actually sewed on it is actually like the side seams and actually just the side seams. There isn't a bottom seam because that's the only thing that's going to be withstanding stress. The top edges, they're literally glued down so that I don't have fur everywhere and it's in the shape that I want. The ears are tacked down with hot glue, so are the wings. So he looks pretty cute.
She showed me that today, and I was like, "Aww."
Adorable.
I made them yesterday in like 2 hours between final exams, so.
But yeah, so altering articles of clothing, so you guys got any other examples for it?
I guess it kind of goes into like patterns, but using clothing, like even if you just have a shirt that you don't like or you don't wear, you can cut it up and make it into a pattern as well. Like it's not really technically alterating clothing.
Well,
I can't talk either.
it gets into patterns and pattern drafting, which
Yeah.
is next, so we might, or no, it's material selection.
Oh, I'm so
But
close.
we can talk about pattern drafting anyway.
Well, pattern drafting is kind of important before material.
Yeah, all right, let's go ahead.
Lead way. But yeah, existing clothing is really good for making patterns, especially if you have something that fits you already. Just, rip it apart, cut it apart, and you already know that it fits you. So when you, in theory, sew it again out of something else, it should fit you. That's a big in theory statement. I've had it happen that it doesn't work like that, but.
The reason being that sometimes the material or whatever that you're using, what you cut apart, stretches. So be very careful if what you're using is, say, a baby doll t-shirt or something like that, because it stretches.
Unless
Okay.
the material that you're remaking it out of also stretches.
Yeah, if whatever you're making out of stretches as well, like if you've chosen, say, something with spandex or rayon or things like that, or something that has a 2-way or a 4-way stretch, you should be okay. But just make sure that whatever you made the pattern out of also has a 2 or a 4-way stretch. Otherwise, you run into complications where this stretches and it fits me, but this doesn't fit me because it doesn't stretch. So be very careful what you make if you're cutting up clothing to draft a pattern, be very, very careful. Me, for example, when I draft patterns, I tend to be more of a person who alters patterns. Like I have one base pattern. I have a base shirt pants pattern that I alter for every single costume that I make. And I have a base dress pattern that I alter for everything that I make. And I've kind of used the top of the dress pattern and replaced my shirt pattern with it because I like it, it fits better. But pretty much what you do is you can take an existing article of clothing, say it's something that doesn't stretch. You want to use your jeans, for example. You take your jeans, you fold them so they would look as a pattern does. For example, for a pants pattern, you have your top and your one side, and then it curves in like that and goes into the leg. And I bumped my elbow. But you can take your pants, fold them into that pattern, put them down on newspaper that you tape together, and just draw the outline of them. And then once you've done that, either you can take it in as much as you need, but you have a pattern right there based off something that doesn't stretch and something that you don't want to cut up. Because some of us, when we don't want our clothes or we're done with our clothes or whatever, we immediately drop them in the Salvation Army drop box. This is what I do. I'm like, I don't like this shirt. Go to Salvation Army. So I don't necessarily have anything that I can bear to part with at the moment in time. And I don't think about cutting anything up either when I give it away. So I don't think that it can be of any further use to me. So I figure I might as well give it to somebody else who would want it. So, but that's definitely something. Like my white shirt that I have for one of my costumes, I could have used that. I don't know why I didn't. I tossed it in the trash because it was covered in fake blood. And I could have just washed it and used it as something else, as a pattern. But I didn't. That was a bad idea. Thanks a lot. You're making me regret the decisions I've made. But
If you're buying preset patterns, always check measurement size.
Whatever.
Measure yourself and compare the measurement sizes. It's the safest way. Don't just go off of your basic dress size or what you think is your dress size.
For guys, it's your waist size.
Yeah. For ladies specifically, like in a lot of the patterns that you can buy just like at Fabricland or something, they have their size chart. And the smallest size on that size chart is either a 6 or an 8. I will vouch right now that I'm probably a size 10, an 8 or a 10 out of the patterns. Whereas if anybody looked at me, if I had to go buy a dress or something, I'm probably about a size 2. So don't just automatically think people don't have your size in the patterns, because, yeah.
Yeah, the first time I had to buy a pattern, when I first actually started sewing more than just a shirt, I think the size that I originally had to buy was a 16 that I originally had to buy. I was in between a 12 and a 14. So you can see definitely what you have to size up to. I think I'm a size 12 now for patterns because the dress that I use for the shirts and stuff like that is a size 12 in patterns. So for guys, you're a bit luckier because the 32 or the 34 or the 36, you guys know this already because it measures your waist in inches. So you're lucky. You can easily go in there and be like, pick up a pattern. What is this in waist size? Oh, it fits this waist size. Okay. And then we hate you for it.
Also, have somebody else measure you. It's usually a bit of a safer idea than trying to measure yourself. Measure twice. If there's a big discrepancy between your measurements, measure a third time. It's kind of like, measure twice, cut once idea. But just, it's a lot easier to have somebody else measure you because you're not bending over and trying to make sure that, you're at whatever number and you're distorting your measurements that way. Measurements are important.
They're very important because how many people see Fabricland has a no returns policy on patterns. So for those of you who have never bought patterns from Fabricland before, you definitely want to measure first because you do not want to buy a pattern there and then realize it's not going to fit you.
Also, patterns usually cost anywhere between $5 to $30. So if you're buying a $30 pattern and it's the wrong size, you're out $30. And you can modify patterns to be bigger or smaller, but it's a lot easier to modify from your size, which with your measurements that are slightly off, than to go down like 8 dress sizes.
I've done that. I altered an existing article of clothing, but I've done that. What about you, Crystal?
My sewing teacher in grade 10, this was a very long time ago, told me when you're looking at an existing pattern, like say from Simplicity, to go from their chart and go down at least one size. I usually use, at the bottom, there's usually like finished garment measurements, and I tend to go by that more than anything because the patterns you get from the store have like a lot of wearing ease in them. Ease is so that you can like move your arms forward in your coats. And you're not kind of sitting there going, okay, I feel like the penguin, this is kind of not fun. But you don't need like 6 inches of ease in your clothing. Like especially as a historical costumer, there's sometimes no ease at all because you're not moving your arms. You're not like playing basketball while you're wearing like a corset and a bustle and all these other bits and things. So I always go by usually the finished garment measurements when I'm choosing a pattern.
I made a top coat once and I couldn't lift my arms. Therefore, I could not eat.
No.
It was awful.
You could have just like
You want to know what? I actually had my friend feed me. And it was so interesting because we were dressed as characters from the same series. And if anyone was involved, or any people passing by, fandom people would pair these two characters together. And I was like, why? So they were taking pictures of her feeding me because I was just like, I'm like a T-Rex making a bed. Like seriously, it was awful. But I mean, like, yeah, you got to be careful. And finish measurements is typically something that's good to go by. Yeah, definitely. What's next? Material?
Yeah,
material.
I think so, because we technically skipped over it.
Yeah.
Material.
Yay, material.
Don't use cheap satin.
Or broadcloth.
Oh my God, you guys, come on.
Fashion, this dress is made out of broadcloth.
Doesn't look like broadcloth.
That's usually something you'll hear from a lot of experienced costumers. Never use broadcloth. Don't use cheap satin. I've seen cases where cheap satin actually comes in handy. I've seen cases where broadcloth actually comes in handy. One of the examples over there, Sailor Moon, for instance. What you have on the collar there.
She's distracted. It's fine.
Well, it's stuff like that. You could easily fold it over and turn it into bias tape, like cheap satin. You can fold it over and turn it into bias tape.
True.
For stuff like that, it makes it shiny. The rest of the costume shiny. It works. And then that way, your entire costume isn't made out of cheap satin, and people are like, oh my God, I can't see. Broadcloth is another one. Broadcloth is something that if I alter something and I have to make a double of it, I will grab broadcloth, and whatever piece I cut out, I will then put it on the broadcloth and make another piece in the broadcloth. So I can do everything that I need to do from there. I had to make a couple jackets for people. So I did everything for my size first, cut it out onto another one so I knew how they were, got their measurements and just altered them a little bit so I didn't have to go through a whole process of getting my pattern, changing the sizes on my pattern, and then trying to figure out how to cut them out again, you know? So broadcloth's useful for that. In costumes, for instance, Becca made her dress out of broadcloth.
I can stand up, I guess. Too big, slightly.
When you make anything out of broadcloth, though, keep in mind you want to double layer it.
It is double layered.
It is, I know it is, that's why I said it.
I know, right?
I can see that it's double layered. But always, always double layer broadcloth, because broadcloth is very thin
You can see through it.
and you can see through it.
It makes really good linings. I like it for linings. Not just face fabric.
You got to be careful with it for linings, though, because it has polyester,
It can, yeah.
and polyester makes you sweat because it is synthetic.
Find 100% cotton if you can.
Yeah, usually the best thing to go with is actually quilting cottons.
Quilting cotton's really
Quilting
nice
cottons
if you want solid colors.
are good. But the problem with quilting cottons is they can be expensive.
Yeah.
So you got to just be careful. But like I said, broadcloth, you can make an entire costume out of broadcloth. You could. I've seen some really good ones.
I have too.
But
I've seen some really bad ones.
I'm like, when I started cosplaying, all my costumes were made out of broadcloth, just based on budget, based on my own skill set. I wasn't going to buy a $20 brocade fabric just to, find out that whatever I was trying to do turned out to look like a piece of garbage when I was done. So, again, it loops back into skill set and budget that we were talking about earlier.
broadcloth is a budget fabric. It's $5 a meter. It is the budget fabric. It really is. Because you can find any color that you need. And it's cheap.
And then go get a membership at Fabricland, and then wait till it's half price, and then it's like even better. And then you just load up on it, and you have like a fabric stash of broadcloth.
Or you buy 1 meter and get 2 free, which was
Also.
insane because then all of a sudden we had no broadcloth left, and I was just like, people really do like broadcloth. They do. And I understand why, but when you're costuming with broadcloth, again, you always, always have to make it like 2 layers. So be careful where you're going if you're making it 2 layers, because you could get heat stroke. Honestly, you can. Walking around in something that's complete broadcloth, especially if it covers your face and things like that and covers your head, you could get heat stroke. So be very careful with anything polyester and it's covering your head. What other materials? There's yes. Are you talking about helmets that are plastic and see-through?
I have no experience.
I've been fiddling around with one of the paper helmets. I'm planning on doing Loki soon, so it does have a full helmet. I've been following tutorials on YouTube mostly, so I'm not done yet, so unfortunately I can't really say whether this is gonna work or not, but can you speak up just a little bit? Sorry, they are actually quite loud in the next room. Okay. Okay. Are you just asking about the full helmet or just the clear bit? Okay. So for the helmet wise, I'm actually gonna say it's probably gonna be easiest to try to build up and modify something. Again, I'm fiddling with the paper craft kind of method that you have to resin and sand and then cover in more resin and then paint and then sand and sand. So we'll see if that works. But yeah, if you can find a helmet or even like something like what it looks like, what you have up here, it's kind of like almost, from what I can see of it, it kind of looks like a welder's mask. If you can get something like that and then build up on it, I think it'll be a lot easier. Material-wise, armor and stuff, there's a lot of options. Locally, a lot of people use craft foam. It's possible. If you want to order, there's always Warbla and Wonderflex, which is really nice. And I'll stop talking because there's questions. I think I saw you first, but I was looking in that direction.
Just going to mention for the doing it in clear plastics, there's a big risk if you do too much of that. I've done it myself. You start actually destroying the needle, so you can't really see properly through it. Also, you want to use finished possible polycarbonate if possible, because if you put them in an in-house magnet form, they actually do something. You need something easily heat up thoroughly throughout in your oven without it melting down and getting your oven dirty. Then you can take out and use that in your refrigerator. You can find instructions on that same
For those of you wondering about helmets and things like that who find it kind of difficult, get an Iron Man helmet. They have plastic Iron Man helmets. They work. They honestly do. They work. You can cover them, things like that. If you need to cut them out, you can. It's a bit of a pain to cut things out. Like if you need to have a clear front, like on that one, for instance, using an Iron Man helmet would probably be kind of difficult. But it would help to use for a cast if you wanted to, say, for example, I've seen some pretty awesome stuff built with paper mache. So an Iron Man helmet is a good place to start. If you're interested in helmets and things like that, grab an Iron Man helmet.
Yeah,
And then that way you
one
can
more
build stuff
question.
on it and
Heather's
see
still
how it
talking.
works on it. So
All right, and we have.
One thing I found is that for a lot of my costumes, I went outside the box and saw things that I could use from industrial and commercial and other things that people would just throw away without basically asking for it, because then you can save them to whatever you need, and it's usually a lot cheaper than buying something that's fully made, like in that case the Iron Man helmet or the mask. So, I went looking for a fast build time, I found a big plastic one for $30, which is a lot less than you would actually get plastic.
see, we can all profit from other stuff like that. Like for instance, I had velveteen and I was like, this is scrap material to me. And Crystal was like, I want it. I want it. I want it. So it's like the saying, one man's trash is another man's treasure. It's very true. It works amongst us too. If one of us has spare material, the first thing we'll do is we'll turn to another one and we'll be like, do you need this? If you don't need this, then I'm going to figure out something else to do with it, or you hold on to it like I do for Iron Costumer. Like I donated all my scrap fabric to them because I was like, they'll use it. They may cut it apart, but hey, they'll use it. They'll have fun. One last thing before closing.
Scrap fabric's always really good to keep around. Again, it kind of goes with why buy broadcloth if you already have a chunk of fabric sitting around and you need to make a pattern to see if something fits or if something is going to work or drape the right way. So scrap fabric's always good to have.
So the very last thing that we'll quickly talk about is sewing. Very first thing is don't be like me and learn how to thread your machine. Read your instructions and learn how to thread your machine. Otherwise you wind up like me and try and figure it out for days. And it's terrible.
We can do gender swaps really quick.
I'm gender swapped right now. For anyone wondering, I am fully bound and everything right now. Unfortunately, it's tensor bandage. Oh my God. It's tensor bandage, which I do not recommend, but I also do not recommend anything like duct tape or any kind of tape. I have seen the most horrifying accidents, including people ripping off their own skin. So please, ladies, do not bind with duct tape. You will regret it. However, if you put a shirt on underneath the duct tape, that's okay. You won't rip your skin off for one, but you could get heat stroke. So be very careful because there's no way for the sweat to get out or anything. You will overheat. Be very careful. I would suggest, actually, I have...
If you have the budget, you can also look into like compression wear, like compression shirts and stuff.
It's called Underworks.
That's what
so
it is.
if you look up ftm.underworks.com, you will find a bunch of stuff. It's all compression vests and stuff like that. That is your best option. They also have tummy compressors and for your sides and things like that as well to make your your figure look more square and less shapely. So they're quite useful. I'm still waiting for mine to come in. I don't think they like me, so.
And then I guess just for cross cosplaying, makeup is also quite important. Makeup's important in cosplay anyways. It doesn't matter who you're cosplaying, even if the character doesn't wear makeup, you should wear makeup. But it, again, kind of comes a bit to skill set about if you know how to contour your face. Did I say that right? Contour?
All I have to say is, guys, you should wear makeup too.
Yeah.
It does help, guys. You should, honestly, if you're gonna cosplay or anything like that, you should wear makeup too. I'm not saying like you should have mascara and eyeliner and everything like I have on right now. I'm just saying a little bit of foundation goes a long way. It helps smooth out blotches in your skin and everything like that. It really does, and it helps. It's a big help. We actually have to wrap up the panel. If you want to ask us some questions, so feel free. We'll be just outside the room. Thank you very much, guys.
Well, I guess my statement was correct when I was like, can we get through all that? It was just